The rain had turned the loading dock behind Mercer and Doyle Freight into a black mirror, and Talia Boren stood in it, counting money that wasn't hers to count. Not stealing. She wanted that clear, even if only to herself. She was reconciling. Every Thursday she stayed after the day shift emptied out, sat on an overturned milk crate with the yellow ledger balanced on her knees, and matched the shipping manifests against the deposit slips, because somebody had to, and the somebody who was paid to do it had stopped doing it 11 weeks ago. She'd noticed the gap the way you notice a draft in a house you've lived in long enough. Not all at once, but as a slow understanding that something you couldn't see was moving air where no air should be. 11 weeks, roughly $40,000 if her arithmetic held, and her arithmetic always held. That was the one thing nobody could take from her. She was 29 years old. She had $800 to her name and a car that started only if you loved it, but she could look at a column of numbers the way other people looked at a face they'd known their whole lives. She heard the door before she saw anyone. The heavy one, the freight entrance, which shouldn't have been unlocked at 9:30 on a Thursday in February. Talia closed the ledger. She didn't hide it. Hiding would have meant she'd done something wrong, and she hadn't, and 30 years of being told otherwise had left her with exactly one form of stubbornness. She would not act guilty for a thing she hadn't done. 2 men came out of the dark. Then a third, walking a half step behind, and it was the third one the other 2 were arranged around, the way iron filings arrange themselves around a magnet without seeming to decide to. She'd never seen him before. She'd have remembered. He was tall in the way that made rooms feel smaller, dark coat beaded with rain, and there was a scar that ran from beneath his left ear down into his collar, old and silvered, the kind of scar that had healed a long time ago and been carried a long time since. He looked tired, not sleepy. Tired the way stone is tired, worn smooth by having borne weight for years. "You're not Petrov," he said. "No. Where's Petrov?" "Gone home. It's Thursday." She kept her voice level. She'd learned young that the trick was to let them see you weren't afraid before you decided whether you were. "The office is closed. You want the day manager. He's back Monday." The 2 men flanking him shifted, and one of them started to say something, and the tired man lifted 2 fingers off his own thigh. Barely a movement, and the man went quiet. Talia filed that away. Whoever he was, he didn't raise his voice to be obeyed. That was a more expensive kind of power than shouting. "What's in the book?" he said. Not a question. Numbers. Whose numbers? She should have lied. She knew even in the moment that the smart thing, the surviving thing, was to say invoices, receiving logs nothing, and go home and never come back. But she'd spent 11 weeks alone on a milk crate in the cold building a case that no one had asked her to build, and some starved thing in her wanted, just once, for it to matter. "Yours, I think," she said, "if you own this place." Somebody's been skimming the overflow accounts, cash consignments, the ones that don't clear through the bank. About 40 grand since the end of November. It's not sophisticated. Whoever's doing it thinks nobody reads the manifests against the deposits because the 2 systems don't talk to each other. She held up the ledger. "I made them talk to each other." The dock was very quiet. The rain filled the quiet the way rain does. The tired man crossed the space between them. His men tensed. She saw them want to move with him and not be allowed. He stopped close enough that she had to tilt her chin, and he looked at her the way she looked at a column of figures, like she was a problem that had a correct answer, and he intended to find it. "Rayland," said one of the men behind him, low, a warning or a question, and so she had a name now. "Rayland." She turned it over. It didn't soften anything. "You," he said to her, ignoring the name as though it had been said about someone else, "should not have told me that." "Why?" "Because now I have to decide what you are." He said it without heat, almost gently, and that was worse than a threat shouted would have been. A woman who found a thief and stayed late every week for 3 months to prove it, out of nothing but the offense of the thing. That's rare. That's almost unbelievable. Or a woman who is the thief, and who's very good, and who's built herself an alibi in ink. He tilted his head a fraction. "You understand my problem." "I understand you're a man who assumes the worst about people," Talia said. "And I understand why." But I didn't take your money. I don't have your money. Look at my car in the lot if you want to know whether I've come into $40,000. It's the Corolla with the door that's a different color than the rest of it. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The memory of where a smile would go. Names, he said. In the book. Who signed the consignments? She opened the ledger, and here was the moment she'd known would come and dreaded, because the name at the bottom of 9 of the 11 skimmed consignments was a name she'd been hoping, in the private, cowardly part of herself, not to have to say out loud. Dessa Harrow, she said. Your logistics coordinator. She signs off on the overflow, and then the overflow is short, and the amounts short are almost exactly the amounts she's been depositing into a personal account I probably shouldn't have looked at, except the account number was written on the back of a manifest in her handwriting, which is a level of carelessness I honestly find insulting. For the first time, the tired man looked at her with something other than suspicion. Dessa Harrow, she'd learn later, was his cousin, was the daughter of the woman who'd raised him after his own mother went into the ground, was in the arithmetic of loyalty that men like Rayland kept, family, and family was the one account he'd never thought to reconcile. "Get in the car," he said finally. No, the word landed in the wet air. His men went rigid. Nobody, she understood, said that word to this man. But she'd said no to worse than him, to the foster father who'd used her as a punching bag until she was 15 and big enough to run, to the boyfriend who'd emptied her savings account at 22 and called her stupid for having trusted him, to a whole life of men who'd expected her to fold because folding was what girls like her did. She was so tired of folding. I'll come to whatever room you want me to come to, on my own 2 feet. In the daylight with witnesses, she said. I'll show you every page and every number, and I'll prove to you I didn't touch your money. But I am not getting into a car with 3 men I don't know, because one of them told me to. If you're going to hurt me, you can do it here, where at least the cameras on that pole across the lot will catch your face. She'd made the cameras up. There were no cameras. The company was too cheap. But he didn't know that, and the bluff was the truest thing she'd ever said, because underneath it was the real message. I have thought about the worst outcome, and I am choosing my terms inside it anyway. Rayland looked at her for a long time. Then he looked up at the pole across the lot, at the dark shape that might have been a camera and was in fact a broken floodlight, and something in his face changed. Not softened exactly, but recalibrated, the way a man recalibrates when he's revised his estimate of an opponent upward. Tomorrow, he said, noon. There's a coffee place on Beckwith, the Portuguese one with the yellow awning. You'll bring the book. You'll sit across from me in the window where the whole street can see us, and you'll walk me through every number. He turned to go, then stopped. If you're lying, no camera on earth will help you. If you're not, he didn't finish. He walked back into the dark, and his men went with him, and the freight door boomed shut, and Talia sat back down on the milk crate because her legs had stopped agreeing to hold her. She did not sleep that night. She sat in her apartment with the window cracked to the February, cold because the cold kept her sharp, and she went through the ledger 3 more times, not because she doubted it, but because certainty was the only armor she owned, and she intended to wear all of it. The coffee place on Beckwith was exactly as he'd described, yellow awning gone grey at the edges, the smell of custard tarts and burnt espresso, a Portuguese grandmother behind the counter who took one look at Rayland and stopped talking mid-sentence. He was already in the window seat when Talia arrived at 11:50. He'd chosen the chair with its back to the wall. Of course he had. She sat. She put the ledger on the table between them like a peace offering and a weapon, which is what it was. For 2 hours, she walked him through it. She showed him the manifests and the deposit slips and the 11 weeks of the 2 never quite adding up. She showed him Dessa Harrow's signature, the same loop on every skimmed consignment. She showed him the account number on the back of the manifest and watched his jaw go tight when he recognized the handwriting. Because he did recognize it, she could see the recognition land like a slow blade. He didn't say Dessa was his cousin. He didn't say anything about who she was to him. He just asked questions. Good ones, sharper than she'd expected. The questions of a man who understood money even if he'd never been taught to write it in neat columns. And she answered everyone. And somewhere in the second hour, the questions stopped being interrogation and started being something closer to consultation. "Why did you do this?" he asked finally. "Nobody paid you. Nobody asked you. You're a data entry clerk making, what, 19 an hour? You're making 19 an hour and you spent 3 months of your own unpaid time building a fraud case for a company that doesn't know your name. Why?" Talia turned her coffee cup a quarter turn on its saucer. It was the kind of question she didn't have a clean answer for, so she gave him the messy one. "Because I've been robbed my whole life," she said, "by people who counted on me not being able to prove it. My foster father took the government money that was supposed to feed me, and I couldn't prove it. A man I loved took everything I'd saved, and I couldn't prove it. When you can't prove it, they get to decide it never happened. And you have to walk around inside a story where you're the crazy one, the ungrateful one, the one who imagined it." She met his eyes. "I can't fix any of that. It's gone. But I can read a ledger. And when I found somebody stealing and I realized I could prove it so cleanly that nobody could ever tell me I made it up, I couldn't stop. It felt like the only kind of justice I'd ever get to hold in my hands. Even if it wasn't mine." Rayland was silent. Outside the window the street went by. Ottawa in February, salt-stained and grey, people hunched into their coats. "What's your name?" he said. "Your whole name. Not the one on the timesheet. Talia Boren. Talia Boren." He said it the way you set a stone down on a table deliberately so you'll know where it is later. "I'm going to deal with Dessa. That's not your concern, and you're going to want it to stay not your concern." He closed the ledger and, when she reached for it, kept his hand flat on the cover. "This stays with me. That's my work. That's evidence against my—" He stopped. "Recalibrated again, against someone who is going to make your life very short if she learns your name. You want it out of your apartment. Trust me on the one thing I know better than you." She let go of the ledger. It was, she'd think later, the first genuine decision she made in the whole affair. Not to defy him, but to believe him. She'd spent her life being unable to trust anyone and had assumed that made her safe. It had only made her alone. "There's a bookkeeping position," he said, standing, dropping bills on the table that were far too much for 2 coffees and a plate of tarts. "My legitimate side. Freight, warehousing, 3 restaurants, a construction outfit. All of it real. All of it clean. All of it currently being run through the books by people who couldn't find $40,000 if it was on fire in front of them. I need someone who can make the systems talk to each other." "You said that. Make them talk. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a way out of an apartment with a window that doesn't lock and a car with a mismatched door, in exchange for the only skill I've met this year that I actually respect." He looked down at her. "It's more money than 19 an hour. It's less peace than you have now. I won't pretend otherwise. What's the catch?" "The catch is me," he said simply. "The catch is that you'll learn things about how the money moves that you can't unlearn, and that some of it won't be clean, and that once you know it, you're inside, and inside is a place with a very narrow door out. I'm telling you that plainly, because the one thing I won't do is what everyone else in your life did. I won't take something from you while you're not looking. You'll see the whole price before you pay it." And that, she'd understand much later on a night she couldn't yet imagine, was the moment. Not the loading dock, not the coffee shop window. This, a dangerous man laying the cost out in full, in daylight, and letting her choose. Nobody had ever let her see the price first. Every man before him had presented her the bill only after the thing was already gone. She said yes, not because she was reckless, because for once she'd been shown the ledger before she signed. The first 6 months, she kept her guard up like a fist she was afraid to unclench. She found the office they gave her, real windows, a door that locked, a chair that didn't dig into her spine, and she waited for the trick, the moment the kindness turned out to be a leash. It didn't come. What came instead was work, more of it than she'd ever had, and the slow astonishment of being good at something in front of people who noticed. She untangled the restaurants first. found a supplier double-billing the Italian place on Preston and a manager at the warehouse running a small, quiet theft of his own. Nothing like Dessa's scale, just a man taking a little and hoping. She brought it to Rayland the way she brought everything, in a folder, in ink, in columns that couldn't be argued with. "You could have skimmed this yourself," he said once, tapping a folder. "You know where every seam is. You could take from me and I might not catch it for a year." "You'd catch it," she said. "You caught it when it was Dessa and she's your—" She stopped. She still didn't say it. He still hadn't told her, and she'd decided the not saying was its own kind of intimacy, the two of them holding a thing carefully between them, unnamed. "You'd catch it. And anyway, I don't want your money. I told you that on the dock. I want the numbers to be true. That's the whole thing. That's all I've ever wanted from anything." He looked at her for a long moment, the tired eyes going somewhere she couldn't follow. "I believe you," he said. "That's the problem." She didn't ask what he meant. She was learning his silences the way she'd learned the larger, patiently, waiting for the two systems to line up. What she didn't know that whole spring and summer was that Dessa Harrow had not simply vanished. Rayland had dealt with her the way he dealt with family, which was to say incompletely, because the one account he couldn't reconcile was the one that had his own blood in it. He'd taken the operation from Dessa and cut off her access and made it clear the theft was known. He had not, could not, do the last thing, the thing he'd have done to anyone else, and Dessa, humiliated, cut off, blaming not herself but the woman who'd found her, the little clerk on the milk crate, the nobody with the yellow book, had spent those same months building her own kind of case, not in ink, in the ears of men who'd been waiting a long time for a reason to move against Rayland, men who ran a rival operation out of the East End, and who were very interested to learn that the great cold man had a weakness, a bookkeeper he protected, a woman he sat across from in coffee shop windows in full view of the street. The night it came apart, Talia was working late again. Old habit. The office was empty, the good office with the locking door, and she was 3 columns deep in the construction accounts when she heard the outer door. The heavy one, open when it shouldn't have. The memory of another loading dock went through her cold. But it wasn't Rayland this time. It was Dessa Harrow, whom she'd only ever seen in a signature, and 2 men Talia didn't know, and one of them had a hand inside his coat in a way that made the whole room go still and slow. The famous ledger, Dessa said. She was older than Talia had pictured, and better dressed, and there was a brightness in her face that wasn't sanity. The girl who reads, "You know what you cost me? You know what he took from me, over a stranger who did sums." "He took it because you stole it," Talia said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Old training. Show them you're not afraid before you've decided whether you are. I didn't do anything to you. I read what you left where anyone could read it. Nobody was supposed to read it." Dessa's voice cracked. Nobody had for years. "And then you," she gestured, a sharp, furious motion, at the neat office, the folders, the locking door. "Look at you now, in my family's house. You think he cares about you? You think you're anything to him but a clean set of books? When they're done tonight, there won't be a mess. There's never a mess with him. That's the joke. You'll just stop, like a light, and he'll get a new bookkeeper, and in a year he won't remember your mismatched car." And here was the thing Talia had learned across a whole life of being cornered by people who counted on her folding. The fear was real, the fear was enormous, but underneath the fear there was always a cold, flat place where the arithmetic still worked, and in that place she noticed that Dessa was talking. Talking a lot. Talking the way people talk when the men they've brought are waiting for a signal, and the signal is hard to give because giving it makes it real. Talia noticed something else, too. She noticed that the outer door, the heavy one, had not fully closed behind them. And she noticed, because she noticed everything, that the security panel on the wall, the one she'd insisted they install in February, the one Rayland had wired to his own phone because he trusted no system he couldn't see, was showing a small, steady green light that meant it was recording, and had been recording since the moment the door opened. She had, in fact, put in real cameras this time. It had been the second thing she'd done after the door that locked. "You should know. Talia said, and she said it to the camera as much as to Dessa, calm, clear for the record the way she wrote everything, that everything in this room is being recorded. Your face, their faces, every word you've said about what you cost him and what you came here to do. She set down her pen. I spent my whole life unable to prove the things that were done to me. I promised myself I'd never be in that position again. So I built the proof first. Before I needed it, that's the only thing I'm actually good at. Dessa's face changed. The two men's faces changed faster. The green light meant Rayland's phone had lit up the moment the door opened. And Rayland, who slept the way stone sleeps, had already been moving for 4 minutes, which in the arithmetic of that particular night was several minutes more than enough. He came through the half-closed door without hurry, which was somehow the most frightening thing Talia had ever seen, a man walking into a room with 3 armed people in it at the pace of a man arriving somewhere he owned. His 2 men came behind him, and the geometry of the room reorganized in a heartbeat. Iron filings, the magnet arrived. "Dessa," he said. He didn't look at the men she'd brought. They'd already been reduced, in his ledger, to a line item he'd settle in a moment. He looked only at his cousin, and his tired face was more tired than Talia had ever seen it, and underneath the tiredness was grief, the specific grief of a man doing the sum he'd refused to do for months because he'd known what it would total. "You brought Vantry's people into my house. You chose her." Dessa's voice broke fully now, and the fury was all grief too, the 2 of them mirror images across the room, family and family. "Over me, over your own, I didn't choose her over you." Rayland's voice was very quiet. "You stole from me and I let you live, and I moved you out of the way, and I told myself that was mercy. It wasn't mercy. It was cowardice. I couldn't close the account because your mother's face is in it." He exhaled, and the exhale had 30 years in it. "And because I couldn't close it, you were free to do this. So no, I didn't choose her over you. I failed to choose anything for months because you were family. And this," he moved his hand, taking in the men, the coat with the hand still inside it, the whole ruined night. "This is what my failing to choose bought. I own that. But I'm going to close the account now." What happened next, Talia would never fully describe to anyone. And the recording, which existed, which was real, which she'd made sure of, was given to no one, because some kinds of proof you build not to use but to hold, so that no one can ever tell you it didn't happen. It ended without the mess Dessa had promised. It always did. Afterward, in the emptied office, Rayland stood looking at the wall panel with its steady green light for a long time. "You put in cameras," he said, "in February, right after the door. You told me on the dock there were cameras, and there weren't. Then." She was shaking now that it was over, the cold, flat arithmetic place folding back up. The fear arriving late the way it always did, after it was safe. "So I made it true. I don't like saying things that aren't true. It bothers a hole." She gestured vaguely. "It's a thing." And Rayland, the tired man, the cold man, the man with the scar and the narrow door and the ledger of loyalty he'd finally terribly balanced, Rayland laughed. It was a short sound and a rusty one, like a hinge that hadn't moved in years, and it startled them both. "You made the lie true so you wouldn't have lied," he said. "You reconciled it." "Somebody has to." He crossed the room. He stopped close the way he had on the dock a lifetime ago, and this time she didn't have to steady herself, because she'd stopped being afraid of him somewhere around March, without noticing the day it happened. "I'm going to tell you the price now," he said. "The way I promised I always would. If you stay, you're in this the rest of the way. Not the books. Me. And I'm not a clean set of accounts, Talia. There are pages in me that will never balance. You, of all people, should walk away from a ledger that won't balance." She thought about it. She actually thought about it, standing in the office with the green light steady on the wall, because he'd earned an honest answer, and honesty was the only currency she'd ever refused to counterfeit. "Every ledger I've ever loved wouldn't balance," she said finally. "My whole life is a column that doesn't add up. I stopped needing the total to come out even a long time ago, what I need." And here her voice did something it hadn't done in front of another person in years. It wavered and she let it. "What I need is for someone to show me the real numbers. All of them. The pages that don't balance too. Nobody ever showed me the real numbers before you. They just handed me the bill after. The rain had started again outside, the same February rain that had turned a loading into a black mirror the night this began, and it ran down the office windows and caught the green light and the grey street, and made the whole city look like a page still wet with ink. "Then stay," he said. It was not a command. She'd have known the difference. It was the closest a man like him came to asking. She stayed. Not because he saved her. She'd noticed, even in the worst of it, that she'd half saved herself, that the cameras were hers and the calm was hers, and the refusal to fold was the oldest thing she owned. But because for the first time in 29 years, someone had laid the whole account in front of her, the credits and the debts and the pages soaked in red, and let her choose with her eyes open. She'd spent her life being robbed by people who counted on her not being able to prove it. She'd finally found the one man who handed her the proof himself and told her to read every line, and waited, tired, scarred, patient as stone, to see what she'd decide the numbers meant.